In the collective imagination, when we talk about characters, a sort of hierarchy tends to emerge. A good character is one who develops, who changes, who progresses, who effectively becomes someone else as the story unfolds. It is therefore a scalable character. Conversely, a character who does not evolve, a static character, is inevitably perceived as flat, poorly developed, or even uninteresting. But in reality, this view is completely wrong, for it is based on the assumption that character development necessarily implies evolution. But in fact, this is not the case at all. Development does not necessarily require evolution. A static character can therefore be very well written without necessarily evolving. In this video, we'll take a closer look at these two types of characters. We'll explore what they really are, their roles, their strengths, and their limitations. A scalable character is simply a character who changes as the story unfolds. But this change is not random. In the vast majority of cases, it stems from an initial flaw, a flawed worldview, a weakness, an inability to act appropriately, and so on. The role of the story is therefore to confront this flaw. Thus, through trials, conflicts, and obstacles, the character will be forced to question themselves. This inevitably implies a change, a transformation, an evolution. They move from state A to state B, and it is this trajectory that constitutes their narrative arc. But this is where the limitation of this type of character lies, because a scalable character depends entirely on their progression. Once their internal conflict is resolved, once they have changed, their arc is, for the most part, complete. And that is why, in many stories, characters become less interesting after their evolution, because the main driving force behind their characterization has already been exhausted. The best example of this is One Piece. For, if we focus on the Straw Hats, most of them concluded their development several hundred chapters ago. Today, apart from their power, they cannot develop in any other area. And generally speaking, this problem will affect all secondary or even tertiary characters who have completed their development. If their role in the story forces them to remain in the narrative, they are bound to be irritating to readers, as their actual usefulness will in fact be nil, and Usopp can attest to this. Just a quick reminder, if you're interested in creating or developing original manga, or if you'd like me to do a brief analysis of your manga in a short format, check out CollabManga. Be sure to watch until the end of the video for more details. Conversely, the static character is often misunderstood. A static character is not one who does nothing, but rather one who does not change, who does not evolve. But that does not mean they are not developed. On the contrary, their development is not based on a transformation, but on a revelation. For indeed, the narrative will ensure that we discover different facets of their personality as the story unfolds, whether through the trials or obstacles the character faces, and thanks to these trials, the character's decisions and reactions will allow us to understand them better. Whether it be their values, their limitations, or their contradictions, everything will become clear. A very good example would be the character of Askeladd in Vinland Saga. Fundamentally, he remains true to himself from the beginning to the end of the prologue. But the way the story portrays him gradually reveals the full complexity of his character. It is not he who changes, but rather our perception of him. Askeladd therefore remains fundamentally the same, and that is precisely what makes him so compelling. Because generally speaking, a static character isn't there to evolve, he isn't there to react, but rather to act. It is indeed his actions that are generally the main drivers of the narrative's progression. It is Askeladd who kills Thors and sets Thorfinn's quest in motion. It is Askeladd who brings about Knut's transformation. It is Askeladd who makes Knut a king. Take the example of Erwin from AOT. It is he who leads an expedition to lure the female Titan. It is he who, in Season 3, instigates a coup, and the list goes on. Generally speaking, it turns out that all the actions of static characters require a certain amount of preparation, which is to be expected since, as a rule, static characters serve as antagonists or mentors to the protagonists. This obviously does not mean that they remain inactive from the beginning to the end of the story. We are talking here about the majority of cases. Ultimately, both Erwin and Askeladd had to react at some point in the story. And this generalization is all the more false when we're talking about a protagonist. For if we look at static protagonists this time, unlike static characters who are active, static protagonists are passive. The best example would be Gon Freets from Hunter x Hunter. Unlike other shonen protagonists, he does not follow a classic arc of development. On the contrary, from the beginning to the end of the manga, he remains true to himself. Nevertheless, this passivity will lead to the same limitations as those of evolving characters, because once the character's development is complete, once all facets of the character have been revealed, the character loses its relevance. Togoshi's decision to remove his own protagonist from the narrative is therefore by no means a coincidence, although he did so partly because Gon had achieved his goal. In any case, the active static character influences the narrative. He imposes his vision. He confronts others with their contradictions. He forces the world to react. And what's interesting is that this consistency allows him to create conflict constantly. Unlike the evolving character, he doesn't depend on a story arc. As long as his ideology clashes with his environment, he will remain relevant. And that's where it all makes sense. Because in the end, the debate was never static versus evolving. The real debate is about understanding their function. The evolving character embodies a journey. He represents change. The static character embodies an idea. He represents a force. And in the best stories, the two are intertwined. And Vinland Saga is the best example of this. It is indeed Askeladd who shapes the entire course of Thorfinn's development. It is because of him that Thorfinn embarks on a quest for vengeance. It is because of him that Thorfinn becomes an empty shell, and finally, it is thanks to him that Thorfinn achieves his rebirth. Ultimately, Askeladd's actions have triggered reactions in Thorfinn. As a result, the static character creates pressure. The evolving character reacts to this pressure. This creates a dynamic, a conflict, a movement, and thus, a narrative. Ultimately, a good character isn't necessarily one who evolves. It's a character who serves the story. An evolving character will change himself. A static character will change others. And it is precisely this complementarity that allows a narrative to work. To delve deeper into CollabManga, as explained earlier, it helps boost the visibility of various manga projects through several tools made available on the platform. The first of these is a sponsorship system built into the site. Any content creator can sign up on the site and list their various sponsorship options. Meanwhile, as authors, you can benefit from the visibility provided by the content creator to promote your work. The second tool is the various social media accounts linked to CollabManga, where chapters will be posted along with some quick analysis videos. I myself will be able to promote them on this channel, etc. And finally, there's the mobile app, currently under development. It will be a mobile version of the site, but directly accessible via the various app stores. As a result, thanks to the various notifications and the fact that the site is in app form, you'll benefit once again from greater visibility. And of course, CollabManga features a full catalog, a messaging system, and a suggestions page to help you out if you're stuck for ideas. Obviously, all of this is only possible if my site manages to attract a large number of users, whether they're authors, screenwriters, content creators, or just readers. But that's why I'm telling you about it here. So if you know anyone, or are yourself, who wants to create their own manga or has already created some, please feel free to direct them to CollabManga